Hello, and welcome to Truth Be Told About Going Wild. I'm your host, Robert Hensley, and this is the podcast inspired by the principles of personal rewilding. Last week, we had our first episode. It was a general kind of overview of personal rewilding, what it is, why we do it. And today, I thought that we could kind of jump in and start talking about the four pillars of rewilding. So if you remember last week, we talked about the four pillars, right? They were wild self or wild being, wild rhythms, wild action, and wild ancestors. And today we're going to look at the first pillar, which is wild self. Now, a lot of people think that when we talk about returning to or finding a wild self, that we start talking about, letting ourselves go and not getting haircuts and needing shaves and running around the woods naked with, swinging from vines and whatever. There are all kinds of connotations and certain perceptions that come with the word wild. Really, with wild self or reconnecting or finding our wild self, I like to take it back to Shrek. Right? Remember when Donkey comes into the marsh and he's trying to figure Shrek out? And Shrek says that ogres are like onions. There are layers. Well, people are the same way. We have layers of self, right? There are higher selves, our base self, and somewhere deep inside, right, in kind of, there's a recessed layer, which is our wild self, right? It's the part of us that remembers that we came from nature, right? That we are nature, that we belong in the forest, that we at one point lived in the forest with the animals, with the trees, with the plants, and that relationship was symbiotic. For a lot of people, wild self really feels almost like a form of regression. They feel that it's tapping into something that feels younger and less developed, and that's because we haven't developed that part of ourselves, right? We're conditioned to become adults and put away childish things, to lose wonder and awe. And the thing about it is wonder and awe, right? That's where learning happens. That's where we get excited about new information and seeing and observing new things and trying to figure out how that works with us, and how we can put that into practice. That's what education is about, right? It's not about kind of repetition and memorization and making it through tests. It's really about observing, practicing something hands-on, and having that practice become something that is a part of our wild self, right? And so we are trying to rediscover that wild self in the first pillar because that's what's going to allow us to really reconnect, right? That's when we really start to acknowledge and accept that we have an innate connection to the world around us, to the natural world. And there are a couple of tools and techniques and things that we can do to facilitate that. One is nature immersion, and that is simply going outside, going for a walk, hiking, camping, taking the time to observe the natural world, to be a part of the natural world. And so what we're really trying to find, right, is a way, a path to get there. So you'll hear people who are, talking about their journey to reconnecting with the natural world, and they'll talk about forest bathing, and there are some Japanese principles like Yatori that really kind of help or take people back to the wild in a way that is not necessarily practiced here in the West. And those things are really about not just walking in the woods, although that helps, but it's about being present, about being mindful in that practice, about allowing ourselves to walk and meditate and observe and find wonder in the stillness of the natural world. And when we say the natural world, that could be a walk in the woods, it could be a walk on the beach, it could be spending time in the desert, it could be, you know, out in the plains looking at wildflowers. We talk about green space, but blue space, along the ocean, is a thing too, and it has just as many benefits as spending time in a green space. And then when we again add to that kind of nature immersion, we start adding meditation, right? Mindfulness practices where we start to clear our minds and allow kind of the day to day to filter into the background. And we're really very present in the natural space where we are, and we can observe and feel kind of the vibration of the universe in those spaces. Some people like myself, I enjoy elemental meditation and meditating in a way that honors kind of the building blocks of life, earth, air, fire, and water, and consciousness, and things like that. And that is a great way too of connecting, of finding that of your wild self, right? Allowing yourself to really be a part of this beautiful cyclical world. And then also we are sometimes working with what we call reconciliation, which is that part of the practice that is after we've been outside. After we've been outside, after we've meditated, after we've given ourselves a chance to, put our feet on the leaves, or we've touched the dirt, or we've picked up rocks and we've looked, really looked and seen the world around us, then we reconcile that through things like reflective writing, where we start to journal and keep track of how we feel and what it made us feel and what we saw and how we saw it, and so that we can track how our perception of the world shifts and changes. And reconciliation doesn't have to be journaling. If you're not a writer, if you're a sketcher, you can sketch pictures. If you're a talker, by all means, find a group of people and talk about, I sometimes in things like this, it helps to have a partner, someone that you're rewilding with, because then it's someone to hold you accountable, but also someone to share these moments with, who can help you kind of reconcile and track your progress verbally. And that's fine. And so that really for me is for me it was I don't want to say the hardest pillar thing to get into, but I felt as if when I first started, I felt like I was floating, like I was really lost, that there wasn't a lot of connection there. I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be feeling or sensing. And again, once you really allow yourself to go into the mindfulness aspect and be present when you are in the woods, for me, I went into the woods. When I was in the woods and sitting down on a log, and I took my shoes off and I put my feet on the leaves, and I petted some moss, and I closed my eyes, and I really just allowed nature to speak to me. And the level of comfort and just the level of comfort that I felt in that time and space let me know that was me reconnecting, that was me kind of coming home in a way. And the more that I practiced that, the easier that connection was to kind of hold on to or tap into when I went into the woods. And eventually it was something that I was able to feel even when I wasn't physically in the woods, but all I had to do was kind of close my eyes and think about the environment and the world around me, and I could sense that connection. And that, finding your wild self, that part of you that is connected, um, kind of, if you want to say from your soul, right? That is, the first pillar of personal rewilding and how we find our place in the natural world. And from there, it's easier then to talk about not just wild self, but wild rhythms. Then it's easier to understand the cyclical nature of the world and the symbiotic relationship we should have with nature. It's easier then to talk about or feel the importance of wild actions, whether that is just for me, it's about stewardship. For a lot of people, it's about stewardship. Some people take it a little further and go in more into kind of activism, and that's fine. It's not necessary, but where you take it where you need to take it. And then when it gets to wild ancestors, too, again, that's something that okay, it is what it is kind of in the general conversation. But when you start looking at that from the perspective of the wild self, the wild being, and a coming from a place that is connected to the natural world where you have a relationship with nature, then it's easier to start seeing and understanding how the relationship that our ancestors had with nature have kind of shaped our own connection to or perception of the natural world. So yeah, so today again was really just about talking about pillar one, the wild self, finding that innermost part of yourself. And for me, I'll tell you, for me, when I talk about wild self, my wild self, I close my eyes and I envision it being that child, that little kid who's climbing trees and making mud pies and, you know, got my toes in the dirt and I'm playing in the stream and I'm uh, swinging from behind. That little kid. That's my wild self. And I see him every time I close my eyes and I meditate, and um, and it warms my heart. Right, it's what opens me up. I hope that if you are interested in personal rewilding, that if you're researching this or you have questions, please feel free to reach out. You can find my information on the website, www.rhnaturereconnect.com. Again, that's rhnaturereconnectaltogether.com. And, again, remember that if you are following the Truth Be Told family of shows on the Club Paranormal on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. There's Tony Sweet on Fridays with the original Truth Be Told at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 Eastern. Bonnie Burkert on Wednesdays with the same time, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 Eastern with Truth Be Told Transformation, which is more the kind of metaphysical end of things. And of course, Mondays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 Eastern, you'll find Truth Be Told all about going wild. So, have a great week, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week.